Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to round 10 coverage of the 2014 U.S. Chess Championship taking place in St. Louis, Missouri. In this game, let's see, let's back up a little bit. I put on the, I'd moved a few moves forward here. In this game we have Josh Friedel with the white pieces facing Sam Shankland with the black pieces. Josh is someone I haven't mentioned before. I haven't shown any of his games. He's a young player of 27. He has a FIDE rating of 2505, which makes him the 51st ranked player amongst active players in the U.S. So he's a bit of an underdog in this tournament, facing a series of higher rated players. But he's done pretty well. He started slowly. He lost his first game to Alex Linderman and then had a series of draws. But after that, he went on a winning streak, and he's won a few games. And by the end of round 9, he was actually tied with Gadakamsky and just 1/2 point behind the leaders, Alex Linderman and Varuzhin Akobian. So he's in serious, he's in position to challenge for the leadership of the tournament here. And he's got the white pieces, but he is facing the ever-dangerous Sam Shankland. So let's see how it goes. As you might have guessed from the... cancel that. From the position I was showing earlier, we get a English opening. So c4, g6 was played. I'm not quite sure about the exact move order here, what the significance of it is, but after a few moves we get into a pretty typical position. I was just showing how the pawn on c4 and the knight on c3 is clamping down on the move d5 by black, which is often an idea. Sometimes black likes to get in an early d5, but the way this is played, that wasn't allowed. So the bishops come out, and now knight to c6 and knight to f3. And at this point black decides to play e6, trying to, since he couldn't get in d5 in one move, he's going to try and build up slowly. And this gives white a chance to play the move d4, although the most normal move here is castling. And d4 is actually a pawn sack, although it's not clear if black can really hold on to the pawn for very long. But he gets to keep it for a while because there's the bishop and the knight supporting it, so it's well defended. Now knight to b5 brings another attacker against the pawn, but black throws in the move d5, hitting the pawn on c4. So c takes d5 is a move. And now this is a well-known line, or a known line anyway, I should say. I don't know how well-known it is. That was not played in the game, but it's kind of interesting, so I wanted to show it. Black has the move queen to a5 check here. So looks pretty dangerous. This check cannot be blocked by the knight because this pawn is in the way. Of course, when this is played, after c takes d5, this pawn is hitting the knight, so remember that black's knight is hanging. So we got queen takes a5. I mean, in this variation, the normal way to deal with this is to play queen to d2, although I guess knight to d2 is possible. And now queen takes, picking up the knight, but then this knight was hanging too, so white gets a knight in return. And now queen takes c6. And now this is a real pawn sack at this point. White just castles and plays on a pawn down. And let's see, yeah, at some point black may even get in the move e4, cementing this pawn in the center. But if you look at the development after white castles, black is still a few moves away from castling, and white is going to get some compensation with active pieces, and so it's a good gambit for white. So Josh decided not to play that way. He played e takes d5. And this really lets black, or white, lets white take back the pawn. And the pawn could be taken back right away if white so chose. But Josh decided to castle here, leave the pawn hanging out there for a little bit. And Sam continues developing, knight g7, bishop to f4, castles, knight to c7. Oh yeah, this was a funny sequence. I remember this now. Knight to c7. I don't know what this move is doing, right? It's just kind of sticking the knight there. Well, it's hitting the rook. It's not forking anything, but it's hitting the rook. The rook goes to b8, and then the knight goes back to b5. It doesn't really have anything to do from that square, but that exposes an attack on the rook, and the rook goes back to a8. So this is White's way of tickling black a little bit, perhaps. It's saying, well, I could draw the game now if I wanted to. But Josh doesn't want to draw the game. He wants to play for a win, so he doesn't repeat. Instead, he goes queen d2. Now bishop g4 is played, putting some pressure on the knight. So finally, knight bd4, getting the pawn back. So it's not a pawn sack after all, although it was offered for quite a bit. But now White has gotten his pawn back. The material is even, and White has a slightly better pawn structure, but Black has the isolated queen's pawn with the usual pluses and minuses. It has gives Black a little more space, some control of the center, but it may be a liability in the long run. Black continues with queen to b6, trying to put a little pressure on the center. It's the knight and the b pawn. They're all currently defended. Well, let's see. There might be a threat to take that knight. Anyway, bishop to e3 is played, shoring up that knight, and then the queen goes to a6. I'm looking at this pawn here, and maybe looking at doing something on the light squares. I'm not sure exactly. This pawn is actually well defended, but knight takes White plays knight takes c6 here, knight takes c6, and then bishop to h6. And I thought this was a funny move when I saw this, but I was thinking, well, how about bishop takes bishop, queen takes bishop, and then queen grabs the pawn here on e2. But that turns out to be a horrible blunder if you want to take a minute and figure out why the grandmasters don't play like that. Patzers like me do. I'll go ahead and explain. Well, bishop takes h6 was played, and queen takes h6 was played. So this was in the game. But of course, he didn't take the pawn, because if he takes the pawn, White has the move knight to g5, and actually, this is a forced checkmate. The only thing Black can do is make some useless moves like this, and then when he tries to get the rook out of the way, queen here check, and king there checkmate. So there was no way of escaping the checkmate after that. So this was not played with the idea of grabbing the pawn on e2, but after queen takes h6, Black plays the move bishop takes f3. And we get an interesting sequence here. White could just take the bishop, but he chooses instead to take with the pawn. And so that doubles the f pawn, and actually makes this d pawn more dangerous, because now it may be an isolated pawn, but it's also a passed pawn. It has no other pawn to stop it on its journey down the down the board to the queening square. But it's still early in the game, of course, and that's a long way to go. I just was mentioning that because in this position, the chess engine much prefers taking with the bishop. But Josh has some particular ideas by taking with the pawn, and you'll see them shortly. So Black plays the move queen to b6, hitting the b pawn again, and I guess it wasn't doing so much on a6 after that sequence. The queen comes back to d2. Rook a to d8, just putting the rook behind the passed pawn. And now f4. And this is the start of Josh's idea. He's planning to, having brought this pawn over from the e file to the f file, he's planning to launch it forward and use it to disrupt Black's king safety. So we get a dangerous position pretty quickly here. Rook f to e1 was played. And there is an exchange of rooks here. Rook takes, rook takes. Now d4, pushing the passed pawn. a3, keeping the knight out of this square, so he doesn't want what he's planning to do. He doesn't want it disrupted by the knight on b4. Black plays a5, possibly preventing the move b4 and further expansion on the queen side. Now bishop to f1. Still a little bit mysterious what White is up to, but the point will come in a bit. a4, and now bishop to d3. And this is the idea with this rerouting the bishop. and still the idea of pushing the pawn forward. The makings of an attack are starting to shape up here, and you wonder, is there enough force here? There's a queen, there's a rook, and a bishop. But that's still quite a bit of force. The king is not safe to wander about the board. It needs to have a safe shelter when there's this much force on the board still. So, but black's pieces seem to be in good position. The queen is momentarily blocked by the knight from coming over and defending the king side, but it seems like that shouldn't be too difficult to remedy. So black plays queen a5. If he could get the queens off, black would really be in excellent shape with this passed pawn. So queen d1, white's not interested in that. And now b5, maybe thinking of creating some activity on the queen side here with his knight and his queen. Queen to c1, continuing to look towards black's king. And now Sam plays queen to b6, just getting his queen in position maybe to come over and defend. And f5 finally. Josh pushes ahead with f5 and starts to try and soften up the king side here. Now Sam Shankland plays knight to a5 and h4, launching another pawn towards the king and leaving the f-pawn sitting here. Black really doesn't want to take this pawn and open up the king to these checks from white's queen. So even with black's queen in position to come over, it's still a risky business to open it up like that. Knight to b3. So that's a good spot for the knight, maybe causing a little bit of discomfort to the queen, but the queen jumps out to f4. And the computer, which was skeptical of white's plan, at this point starts to like white. I think maybe black has gone a bit astray. This knight is kind of far from the action, and it gives white a significant edge here. But black brings his queen over to defend. He's holding on to things, so it's not. There's no sequence that immediately wins. It's just that the computer is liking white's position a lot. So queen to c7. Nice maneuver here with the queen blocking the path on the f-file. Come in and attack this f-pawn from the side. The king goes to f8. Hang on a second. I don't know if that was a forced move. Well, there were other moves. The chess engine is liking knight d2 or rook to f8, as well as king f8. It gives that as a move as well. Okay, so king f8 was played. And now f takes g6. So finally, taking this pawn, h takes. So I guess that was what king f8 was about, getting away from the open h file. Rook to d1, getting behind the bishop, and that move, you know, I just need to say we're at move 33 here, and I think at this time both participants are running low on time. So the follow-up that the chess engine is liking here has a couple ideas. One is king g2, getting the king off the back rank, or h5, pushing ahead with the attack. So it doesn't like this move, rook d1, and I honestly can't say I see the reasoning behind it either. This knight, the bishop did not seem to be under attack, and this pawn was not yet threatening the queen. It may be just that Josh was planning to move the bishop and he didn't want this pawn advancing further. He wanted to get that pawn rook in front of it. So black plays rook d5, but after this sequence the chess engine rates this position as about even. So the attack that was brewing somehow has gone astray by not playing the most precise moves, which is, I have to say, really difficult to find in time pressure. So we're now at move 34. Queen b7, hitting the rook. Queen to e5 defends the rook. And now queen to c8 check. King goes to g7. Queen to g4. So there's a bit of maneuvering here, but white is still not able to find the way to break through. And in fact, the chess engine has now changed its mind and it starts liking black in this position. So it shows how easy it is to go astray in chess. So knight to c5, hitting the bishop, and bishop takes b5. Let me see. I wanted to back up at some point. There was also an idea here. This pawn on b5, I forgot to mention, has been hanging for quite a while. And in this position here, instead of f takes g6, bishop takes b5 could have been played here. and the chess engine approves of that way of proceeding. It likes f takes g6 as well, but from this point forward, for several moves, here also bishop takes b5 is an idea, and probably better than what he played rook d1. And so that pawn after, so that pawn was hanging, and then the rook to d5 defended it, and then this knight move undefended it. And so white, having missed the chance to take the pawn when it was best to take it, decides to go ahead and grab it now and at least have something for his attack. He's got now 5 pawns against 4. But black has excellently centralized pieces, and this bishop is going to take a while. Well, he'll need a move or two to get back to a worthwhile position, and he's got this dangerous passed pawn. So d3, now white pushes on with h5, and h5 maybe was a bit of a mistake too. So queen f3, queen b4, yeah, queen b4 I guess is the recommended move here to maintain equality. So h5, unfortunately the attack is no longer happening, and so this move is just not warranted, and black replies with the best move here, queen takes b2. The pawn on b2 had been left hanging, and there's just not enough of a threat here. Just pawn takes, and there's nothing else going on the against the king. The queen check here is guarded by the rook is one point. So queen to b4 was played, just trying to defend everything. This a3 pawn was hanging, and queen to b3. So the queen is defended there, and Sam is defending his own pawn on a4. So the queens sit there in a face-off like that, and we have achieved the time control. So in that scramble, though, that sequence was favorable to black. Let's back up and see where it really went bad. So I mentioned, so h5 was not the best move. So that was one mistake. And then here, queen b3 was another mistake. So instead of queen b3, maybe a more stubborn defense would have been to go ahead and take on a4 now, and let black have the a pawn. But black would also be winning in that sequence. So I think there were just not a lot of good moves to choose from. So the dust has settled after the time control. We made move 40, but in this position, unfortunately, white is just losing. So this last move, queen b3, it also hits the rook. And of course, white doesn't want to trade queens because this isolated but passed pawn grows enormously in strength when the queens are off the board. But he can't save the rook and avoid the queen trade at the same time. So he's just caught between a rock and a hard place, as they say. So rook to f1, pawn is pushed on to d2, queen runs away to f4, and now queen takes b5, just picking up the bishop. That probably wasn't the best way to play it. What is the engine saying here after d2? It says, go ahead and play h6 check now. Okay, so he has that idea in this situation. He plays h6 check, trying to get something tricky going against the king here. There's still a queen and a rook, so it's possible if black doesn't play accurately. But king g8, and then h7. And now if the king takes, then suddenly white is winning. So these tricks weren't totally idle. This natural move, king takes, fails to queen takes f7, and now king here, queen takes rook. That queen takes f7 was a fork. So that's what this check was about, pushing the pawn, trying to distract the king, and then forking the king and the rook by taking on f7. So Sam played the best move here. He played king to g7, and there's just no more tricks. Rook to d1 was played, putting the rook in front of the passed pawn, and now queen to e2, attacking the rook. Queen to h6 check was played. Kind of a cute trick, but unfortunately it's not sufficient. It distracts the queen so that white gets a queen. The king runs to g5, and now there was this threat of queen here check, but unfortunately after a few checks the checks run out, and so Josh, after creating his queen, and after the move king g5, Josh resigns here. So let's show what would have happened. It was White's turn to move here after getting the queen. Check here. There's only one move for the king, and then there's another check here. Once again, only one move for the king. But after this, there's just no more checks. And of course, Black is already a piece up, and he's got a pawn about the queen, and the knight's under. I mean, the rook here on d1 is under attack. So this is completely winning. The chess engine gives it a rating of -27, or about 3 queens worth. So anyway, just the checks run out, and there's nothing more to it. So after after the move, back up here, after the move king g5, White resigned. So Sam Shankland has done it again. He's upset another contender for the throne. Actually, Sam, being the higher rated player, wasn't an upset technically speaking, but Josh was actually ahead of him in the tournament, so it was an upset in terms of taking down another one of the leaders. So as this tournament stands at the end of the 10th round, Alex Slenderman and Varuzhin Akobian both drew their games today, so they are still tied in first place with 6.5 points. Gadakamsky drew also. He was playing Varuzhin Akobian, so they played to a draw. So he's still half a point behind at 6 points, and half a point behind them at 5.5 points out of 10, both Josh Friedel and Sam Shankland. So Sam, in spite of some shaky play at various times with those 3 wins against leaders or near leaders, has worked his way up the board. And so those 5 players all still have a potential shot at the title. There's just one more round, and if the 2 leaders both lose, and if the 2 players at 5.5 both win, and if Gada draws, there would be a 5-way tie for first place. So very unlikely that would happen, and it may not even be possible depending on the pairings, but that would be like the worst case. So anyway, any of these 5 players, I think technically could emerge as the champion, and so we'll have one more round tomorrow, and if there's a need for a playoff, there will be a playoff on Tuesday, employing rapid games, and I don't know the format of that, but stay tuned, and I will fill you in on what's happening. So that's it for today. Leave any comments in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.